What is it about football that makes rational people abandon reason entirely? You know the feeling. You tell yourself you will check the score at halftime. You end up watching from the first whistle, barely breathing. You convince yourself the result is predictable. The game then proceeds to humiliate that conviction in the most public way possible. This weekend handed supporters across 5 countries, 5 leagues, and 5 very different footballing cultures exactly that experience, the sensation of being completely certain about something and being proven spectacularly wrong, or right, or somewhere in the uncertain territory that lives between the two. 5 matches, 5 stories, 5 scoreboards that told only part of the truth about what unfolded on each pitch. Brighton hosting Liverpool in a fixture that never quite goes the way you expect it to. Nice welcoming PSG with the stubborn optimism of a side that has decided reputation means nothing in 90 minutes. Heidenheim standing in front of Leverkusen with the courage of a club that refuses to accept its own limitations. Dortmund hosting Hamburger in a fixture loaded with nostalgia, rivalry, and the particular electricity of German football when it decides to turn up the volume. And Milan against Torino, a derby of sorts, an Italian football occasion that always carries more weight than the table position of either side suggests. Every single match finished with more than one goal. Every single match delivered what neutrals quietly hope for when they sit down and ask the game for something worth watching. Football, to its eternal credit, delivered. Stay close. This one is worth every second. Match 1, Brighton vs Liverpool. Final score 1-2 over 1.5 goals. There is a question that follows Brighton around like a shadow. Can they actually beat the very best? They play the right football. They recruit intelligently. They press with purpose and construct with patience. They are, by any reasonable measure, one of the most interesting football projects in England. But interesting projects and winning against elite opponents are two separate ambitions, and the gap between them is where this match lived. Liverpool came to the South Coast with the quiet, settled confidence of a side that has rediscovered what it means to function as a unit. Not arrogant. Teams that win consistently rarely are, at least not outwardly, but assured. Calm in a way that makes them deeply uncomfortable to play against, because calmness at the highest level is not passive. It is a weapon. Brighton opened the match the way they always do, on the front foot, asking questions, using the width of the pitch as a tool to stretch and then exploit. Their supporters know this rhythm. They trust it, and for large periods of the first half, there was enough in their performance to suggest that trust was well placed. But Liverpool are patient hunters. They absorb, they wait, they transition with a pace and precision that can turn defensive security into exposed space within the time it takes to blink. The first goal came for the visitors, and with it came the particular silence that falls over a home crowd when the worst possible script begins to write itself. Brighton responded, because Brighton always respond. 1-1, and the ground came alive again with the belief that had momentarily been punctured. Equal terms. The match reset. The tension rebuilt itself from the foundations up. Then Liverpool found the decisive moment, 2-1, and from that point the game became a test of Brighton's belief against Liverpool's composure. Brighton pressed, they created, they had moments that deserved more than they got. But Liverpool managed the game with an authority that is difficult to disrupt when it is fully established. 2-1 to Liverpool. Brighton gave everything and took nothing. Liverpool took everything and made it look quieter than it was. That is the mark of a very good team. Match 2, Nice vs PSG. Final score 0-2 over 1.5 goals. Paris Saint-Germain arriving in any Ligue 1 city carries with it a specific atmosphere that is unlike anything else in French football. There is the weight of the brand, the weight of the investment, the weight of expectation that accompanies a squad assembled to dominate domestically and compete at the very highest level in Europe. And then there is the question, the one that surfaces every single week: will they actually perform? Nice are not a soft touch. The Allianz Riviera is a ground with genuine atmosphere, genuine pride, and a football culture that stretches back decades through the French game. They do not simply roll out the red carpet when the big clubs come to town. They set their defensive structure, they organize their pressing triggers, and they make visitors earn every single thing they get. PSG had to earn it. The first half was tighter than the final score suggests. Nice were disciplined, their shape was resolute, and there were stretches of the match where PSG circulated possession without genuinely threatening. Patient build-up looking for an opening that Nice were determined to keep closed. But closed doors in football are never permanently locked. PSG found the key, and when the first goal arrived, the nature of the contest shifted in the way it always does when you are hosting a side of this quality and you fall behind. You must now attack. And attacking against PSG means leaving spaces that PSG are extraordinarily well equipped to exploit. The second goal felt inevitable the moment Nice were forced to commit forward, 0-2, and the match was settled in PSG's favour with a completeness that left no room for argument. Clean sheet, 3 points, and the quiet satisfaction of a job done efficiently. Ligue 1 is a long season, and PSG know better than most that drop points in matches like this one are where titles are actually lost, long before the final weeks arrive. 0-2, professional, controlled, exactly what PSG needed. Match 3, Heidenheim vs Leverkusen, final score, 0-2. Over 1.5 goals. Before you understand what makes this result significant, you need to understand what Heidenheim represents in modern German football. This is a club from a town that most European football supporters could not find on a map without assistance. A club that climbed through the German football pyramid on determination and tactical intelligence and the sheer refusal to accept that small means weak. Their Bundesliga presence is not an accident. It is a statement made over years of work and sacrifice by people who believed in something when the evidence for that belief was thin. Leverkusen arrived as one of the most technically accomplished sides in European football, a team that had been rebuilding its reputation as a genuine force with a style of play that is both principled and devastating. They press with coordination that borders on choreography. They transition with a speed that makes well-organized defensive structures feel suddenly inadequate. They are, in short, a nightmare to host. Heidenheim hosted them anyway. The first half was closer than Leverkusen would have preferred. Heidenheim did what they do: they organized, they competed, they refused to give their more celebrated opponents the wide-open spaces that make Leverkusen truly dangerous. There was pride in every defensive clearance. There was a message in every tackle: we are here, we belong here, and you will have to be at your very best. Leverkusen eventually were. The first goal came and the structural challenge of the match shifted entirely. The second sealed it, 0-2, and Heidenheim had lost without being humiliated, a distinction that matters enormously to a club with their story and their standing. Leverkusen collected 3 more points on a march through the season that continues to carry the weight of serious ambition. Heidenheim collected nothing but dignity. At this level, on days like this, that is not nothing. vs Hamburger, final score 3-1 over 1.5 goals. German football has a specific flavor when it becomes personal, when history is involved, when the names on the team sheets carry the weight of past encounters, past battles, past seasons where everything was at stake and the result was felt by entire cities. Dortmund against Hamburger carries that weight. These are clubs with stories that stretch back through the decades of German football, clubs that have known glory and pain, elevation and disappointment, and everything in the complicated territory between those two extremes. When they meet, something in the atmosphere changes. The noise is different, the tackles are different, the football is played with an edge that is not always visible in routine fixtures. Dortmund, at home, in front of a crowd that can generate one of the most breathtaking atmospheres in world football, had a point to make. Not about this match specifically, about the season, about their identity, about the kind of club they are choosing to be. They made the point emphatically. 3-1 is a scoreline that tells a story of dominance with a moment of vulnerability woven through it, which is exactly what happened. Dortmund built their lead, they controlled the match through large portions of it, and their football carried the conviction of a team that had arrived at Signal Iduna Park with something purposeful in mind. Hamburger struck 1-3 from their perspective, and there was a period where the tie was not yet fully closed, where you allowed yourself to wonder. But Dortmund had enough. They had the lead, they had the crowd, and they had the composure to protect what they had built. 3-1. 4 goals in a match that delivered exactly what this fixture, this atmosphere, and these two clubs demand of each other. German football at its most engaging, most committed, most alive. You could feel it through the screen. That is not nothing. That is everything. Milan vs Torino, final score 2-1 over 1.5 goals. Serie A has a texture that no other league quite replicates. There is a tactical seriousness to Italian football, a defensive intelligence, a respect for shape and structure that gives every match a particular weight, the feeling that nothing is accidental, that everything happening on the pitch is the consequence of thought and preparation meeting its counterpart and being tested. AC Milan against Torino is not the most glamorous fixture on the Italian calendar. It does not carry the gene-rational mythology of the Derby della Madonnina or the historical enormity of certain other fixtures in the division. But it carries something else, the reality of two clubs for whom results matter in very concrete ways, whose supporters demand and expect, and whose pride is very much on the line every single time they step onto the pitch and represent what those colors mean. Milan went into this match understanding the stakes. There is no hiding place in the upper reaches of Serie A when the fixtures pile up and the margin for dropping points narrows with every passing week. Home form is not simply advantageous at this level, it is foundational. You must defend your ground. The opening stages were measured. Torino are not a side that simply concedes the tempo to more celebrated opposition. They press with organization and defend with a collective discipline that makes goals difficult to manufacture. Milan were required to think, to circulate, to find angles that did not immediately present themselves. The first goal broke the match open. Milan ahead, the crowd settling, the machinery of a club with this history and this expectation beginning to function with the smooth confidence that big stadiums enable when the scoreboard is working in your favor. Torino equalized 1-1, and the match snapped back to life with an urgency that had been building beneath the surface. One moment, one goal, and suddenly everything that had felt settled was unsettled again. This is Serie A. This is always Serie A. Milan found the winner. 2-1, and with it came the release of tension that accompanies a result hard-earned rather than comfortably accumulated. There is a quality to those victories, the ones that require digging deep, that require character alongside craft, that comfortable wins rarely provide. This had character. This had fight. This had, in its final stages, the genuine anxiety of a match that could still have escaped. It did not escape. Milan held. Milan won. 2-1. The full picture: 5 matches, 11 goals. Every single game finishing beyond the 1-goal mark, every single game delivering the attacking action that the over 1.5 goals line promises, and this weekend fully delivered. Liverpool's quiet efficiency against Brighton's brave best. PSG's controlled dismantling of Nice's defensive ambitions. Leverkusen's clinical authority over a Heidenheim side that refused to surrender cheaply. Dortmund's 4-goal statement against a Hamburger side that made them work for every moment. Milan's hard-fought victory against a Torino side that made certain the afternoon never became comfortable. Across 5 leagues, the Premier League, Ligue 1, the Bundesliga, and Serie A, the message was consistent: football does not owe anyone an easy afternoon. It does not reward assumption. It does not reward the decision to check your phone, step away from the screen, or convince yourself that the conclusion is already written before the game begins. Because it never is. Not really. Not in any match that has 2 sides with pride and points and purpose on the line. The over 1.5 goals line landed in all 5 matches. But statistics are the skeleton of the story, not the flesh and blood of it. The flesh and blood was the pressing and the counter-pressing, the defensive heroics and the attacking flourishes, the goals that silenced home crowds and the goals that brought them back to life, the narrow margins and the decisive moments that separated winning teams from defeated ones. Football gave this weekend everything it had. The only question remaining is whether you were watching closely enough to catch it all. Next weekend, it starts again. Different pitches, different clubs, different stories. Same unpredictability, same beauty, same reason to never look away.